My wife looked at the judge and said, "He built nothing. Everything we have came from me." Then the judge leaned forward and asked her attorney one question that made the whole courtroom go silent. "My name is Michael Grant, and for 22 years, I let my wife believe I was just the quiet man behind her life. Not weak, not stupid, just quiet. There's a difference. My wife's name was Laura. When I met her, she was broke, angry, and convinced the world owed her something. I was 31. She was 27. She had ambition. I had patience. And at the time, I thought that was a good match. She used to tell people, 'Michael keeps me grounded.' Back then, I thought she meant she loved me. Years later, I realized she meant I was useful. I paid the rent while she went back to school. I worked double shifts while she built her consulting business. I cooked dinner when she came home exhausted. I listened to her cry when clients rejected her. I stayed quiet when her family said she married beneath her potential. And every time she won, I stepped back and clapped, because I thought that was what husbands did. They supported. They sacrificed. They stayed steady when the other person was climbing. For years, Laura called it our dream. But when the money finally came, it became her empire. The first time she said it, we were at a dinner party. One of her friends asked, "So, Michael, what do you do now?" I smiled and said, "I help manage a few things behind the scenes." Before I could explain, Laura laughed. Not loudly, just enough for the table to hear. "Oh, Michael likes to make it sound important." Everyone chuckled. I smiled too. That was my mistake. Because the first time you laugh at your own disrespect, people learn they can serve it again. After that, it got worse. She started correcting me in public, interrupting me, rolling her eyes when I spoke. If I said something about the business, she would say, "Please don't confuse people. You're not involved in the real decisions." That sentence stayed with me, because I was involved, more than anyone knew. When Laura's business nearly collapsed in year 3, I was the one who saved it. I didn't just give advice. I gave money, quietly, from an inheritance my father left me. Not millions, but enough. Enough to pay debt. Enough to keep payroll alive. Enough to stop the bank from taking everything. But Laura didn't want people knowing her husband rescued her. So we made an agreement. My name would stay off the public face. The company would be structured through a holding entity. I would own a protected percentage. She would operate it, and we would both benefit. At the time, I trusted her. So I signed papers. She signed papers. Her attorney signed papers. And then life moved on. Years passed. The company grew. Laura became respected. Magazines interviewed her. Podcasts invited her. People called her a self-made woman. And every time they did, she smiled. I never corrected them, because I loved her more than I loved credit. That was another mistake, because some people do not see silence as love. They see it as permission. By year 18, Laura was no longer my wife at home. She was a CEO who happened to share my address. She stopped asking how my day was. She stopped saying thank you. She stopped wearing her wedding ring to conferences. And when I noticed, she said, "Don't be insecure, Michael. It's not attractive." That line told me everything. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it, like she had practiced being cruel. Then came Daniel. Daniel was her new strategic advisor. 38. Expensive watch. Too much cologne. The kind of man who smiled with only half his mouth. Laura said he was helping with expansion, but I knew what attention looked like when it stopped being professional. The late calls, the sudden business trips, the phone face down, the laugh she used to save for me. One night, she came home at 1:40 a.m. I was sitting in the kitchen. The lights were off except the one above the stove. She froze when she saw me. Then she smiled like I was the problem. "You're awake," I said. "Couldn't sleep." She dropped her keys on the counter. "Don't start." I didn't raise my voice. I just asked, "Is there someone else?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You really want the truth?" I nodded. She laughed softly. "The truth is, I outgrew you years ago." That was the moment something inside me stopped begging. Not broke. Stopped. I asked, "Does he know about me?" She said, "Everyone knows about you, Michael. You're the husband who stayed home while I built a life." I remember looking at her face. Not angry, not crying, just studying it. Because when someone finally shows you who they are, you should pay attention. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce. She didn't warn me. She didn't sit down with me. She had me served in our driveway. The neighbor across the street watched the whole thing. Laura stood by the window inside the house. She didn't come outside. She just watched, like I was an employee being removed from the building. Her divorce petition was brutal. She claimed I had contributed almost nothing. She claimed I had lived off her success. She claimed the company was entirely hers. She claimed I was trying to take wealth I did not earn. And then she asked the court to deny me any real share of the marital estate. When my attorney, Evelyn Ross, read the petition, she looked at me and said, "She is not trying to divorce you, Michael." I asked, "What is she trying to do?" Evelyn looked up. "She is trying to erase you." That sentence hurt more than the affair, because affairs happen in secret, but erasing someone is public. It is deliberate. It is meant to rewrite your whole life while you are still standing there. The months before court were ugly. Laura changed locks at the office. She froze accounts. She told mutual friends I was unstable. She told her family I was greedy. She told our adult son, Ethan, that I was trying to destroy everything she built. Ethan called me one night. His voice was cold. "Dad, is it true?" I asked, "What did your mother tell you?" He said, "She said you're going after the company." I closed my eyes. "I'm going after the truth." He was quiet. Then he said, "She said you never cared about her success." That one almost broke me, because Ethan had grown up watching me pack Laura's meals, watching me drive her to airports, watching me miss birthdays because I was fixing emergencies at warehouses she owned. But children believe the louder parent first, especially when the quiet parent refuses to fight dirty. I told him, "One day you'll understand." He said, "That's what people say when they don't have an answer." Then he hung up. I sat there for a long time, phone in my hand, dark room, no sound, and for the first time in years, I wanted to defend myself. Not in court, not with evidence, with rage. But rage is expensive. Silence is cheaper. And I had learned something from Laura. People reveal more when they think you are weak. So I let her talk. I let her interviews happen. I let her friends post about women rebuilding after dead weight. I let Daniel appear beside her at charity events. I let the world think I was finished. But while Laura performed, Evelyn and I worked. Quietly. We gathered bank records, old emails, company formation documents, the original operating agreement, the emergency funding transfers from my inheritance trust, the signed addendum Laura had forgotten about, the one that stated my contribution converted into a protected ownership interest if the company crossed a certain valuation. And it had. Years ago, Laura did not know I had kept everything, but my father had taught me one rule. Trust people with your heart if you must. Never trust memory with paperwork. So I kept the paperwork. Every page, every signature, every date. And then Evelyn found something else. Something Laura's own attorney had submitted by accident. A valuation report. Not the public one, the internal one. It showed the company's real worth. Much higher than what Laura declared to the court. When Evelyn placed it in front of me, she said, "She lied on the financial disclosure." I asked, "How bad?" Evelyn leaned back. "Bad enough that the judge will not like it." I nodded, but I still felt no victory, because the thing about betrayal is, even when you know you can win, you still have to mourn the person you thought existed. Court day came on a rainy Thursday. Laura walked in wearing white. That detail bothered me, not because of the color, because she wore it like a costume. Clean, innocent, untouchable. Daniel sat behind her. Her sisters sat beside him. 2 of her friends were there too. They looked at me like I was a stain on the floor. I sat at my table with Evelyn. No family behind me. No dramatic entrance. Just a folder, a pen, and 22 years of being underestimated. Laura's attorney stood first. He was polished, confident, the type of man who spoke like every sentence came with a price tag. He told the judge Laura was the sole driving force behind the company. He said I had provided emotional companionship at best. He said I had no operational role, no leadership role, no meaningful financial contribution. Then he looked at me and said, Mr. Grant is attempting to profit from a legacy he did not build. Laura lowered her eyes, like she was embarrassed for me. That performance was almost impressive. Then Laura testified. Her voice trembled at just the right times. She said, I worked day and night while Michael stayed comfortable. She said, I carried the pressure alone. She said, he never believed in me. Then Evelyn asked her, Mrs. Grant, did your husband ever contribute money to your business? Laura smiled sadly. Small amounts. Household support. Nothing serious. Evelyn asked, Nothing serious? Laura said, No. Evelyn opened a folder. Do you recognize this wire transfer? Laura looked down. For the first time, her face changed. Only for a second, but I saw it. She said, That was personal money between spouses. Evelyn said, It was $312,000. The courtroom went still. Evelyn asked, Was that small? Laura's attorney objected. The judge allowed the question. Laura swallowed. At the time, yes, it helped. Evelyn nodded. Helped how? Laura looked at her attorney. He gave her nothing. She said, It stabilized some temporary cash flow problems. Evelyn turned a page. Temporary cash flow problems, meaning your company was 48 hours for missing payroll? Laura didn't answer. Evelyn asked again, Is that correct? Laura whispered, Yes. I heard someone behind her shift in their seat. Daniel stopped smiling. Then Evelyn asked, Did you sign an agreement converting that emergency funding into an ownership interest? Laura said quickly, No. Too quickly. Evelyn paused. Then she placed the document on the screen. Laura's signature appeared in front of everyone. Large, clear, undeniable. Evelyn said, This is your signature, correct? Laura stared at it. Her attorney stood. Your Honor, we need context. Then the judge raised one hand. The room went quiet. He looked at Laura's attorney and asked, Counselor, did your client disclose this ownership agreement in her financial statements? That was the question, the one that changed everything. Laura's attorney froze. Not because he didn't understand, because he did. He looked down at his papers, then at Laura, then back at the judge. Your Honor, I would need to review. The judge interrupted. That was not my question. No one moved. The rain hit the windows behind us. The judge said again, Did she disclose it? Laura's attorney's voice dropped. No, Your Honor. That silence felt heavier than yelling. The judge leaned back. Evelyn said nothing. She didn't need to. Laura's entire story had cracked open in one sentence. Then came the second blow. Evelyn introduced the internal valuation report. Laura's attorney objected again, but the judge wanted to see it. He read it. His face hardened. He looked at Laura. Mrs. Grant, why does this valuation differ so significantly from the number you provided this court? Laura said, I relied on my team. The judge asked, Your team prepared both reports? Laura said nothing. Evelyn asked, Mrs. Grant, was the lower valuation prepared for divorce proceedings? Laura whispered, Yes, and the higher valuation. For investors. Evelyn looked at the judge. No further questions. That was when I finally looked at Laura. Really looked at her. Her face was pale. Not sad. Not sorry. Afraid. And there's a difference. Sorry means you regret the damage. Afraid means you regret being seen. The hearing continued for hours. More documents came out. Emails where Laura referred to me as the original funding source. Messages to her accountant saying, Keep Michael's name buried unless legally required. A note from Daniel asking, Can we structure around his claim? And Laura's reply, Only if he finds out. That one hurt. Not because it was strategic. Because it proved she knew. She knew what I owned. She knew what I had done. She knew I was not lying. And she still tried to make me look like a parasite. At one point, Daniel stood up to leave. The judge noticed. He said, Sir, sit down. Daniel sat. Fast. For the first time since I had known him. He looked small. During a recess, Laura approached me in the hallway. No cameras, no friends, no performance, just her and me. She said, "Michael, we can still settle this." I looked at her. She lowered her voice. "Don't humiliate me in there." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because after everything, she still thought humiliation only counted when it happened to her. I said, "You had months to be honest." She stepped closer. "You want revenge?" I shook my head. "No, Laura." I looked toward the courtroom door. "I want the record corrected." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not the tears I used to trust. They were tools. She whispered, "After everything we had." That sentence almost got me. Because we did have something. Once. A small apartment. Cheap curtains. Burned dinners. Dreams whispered at midnight. But she didn't kill our marriage in one moment. She killed it in pieces. Every insult. Every lie. Every time she made me smaller, so she could feel larger. I said, "You should have remembered what we had before you tried to bury it." Then I walked back inside. The judge's final ruling did not happen that day. But his message was clear. The court ordered a forensic accounting. Laura was warned about non-disclosure. The company assets were frozen from restructuring, and my ownership claim was preserved. Her attorney looked like a man trying not to drown in expensive shoes. 2 weeks later, Laura's side requested settlement talks. Evelyn laughed when she read the email. "They're scared." I asked, "Of losing?" She said, "No, of discovery." And she was right, because discovery would expose everything. Not just the affair, not just the hidden valuation, but years of manipulation, years of pretending, years of building a public image on a private lie. The settlement they offered first was insulting. A house, a lump sum, a mutual non-disparagement clause, and they wanted me to waive any ownership interest. I said no. The second offer was better. Still no. The third offer came after Evelyn subpoenaed Daniel's communications. That one changed everything. Laura agreed to recognize my ownership interest. She agreed to buy out part of it. I retained a silent equity stake. She paid penalties through settlement adjustments. And the house, I let her keep it. People thought that was weakness. It wasn't. That house had become a museum of disrespect. I didn't want walls that had heard me beg to be valued. I wanted peace. But the real ending came later. 3 months after court, Ethan came to see me. He stood outside my new apartment holding a folder. He looked thinner, older somehow. He said, "Mom told me you tricked her." I said, "What do you think?" He looked down. I read the documents. My chest tightened. He said, "She lied." I didn't say anything. He swallowed hard. "She told me you were trying to steal from her." His voice cracked. "But you saved the company." That was the first time I nearly cried. Not in court. Not when Laura cheated. Not when she humiliated me. But when my son finally saw me. I told him. I never needed credit. He said, "Maybe you should have." That line stayed with me. Because he was right. Sometimes staying silent protects the wrong people. Sometimes humility becomes a hiding place for those who exploit it. Ethan hugged me. For a long time. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had gotten something back that mattered. Not money. Not pride. My son. Laura's public image changed after that. Not dramatically. Not all at once. That is not how real life works. There was no movie-style collapse. No screaming press conference. No instant karma. Just distance. Investors asked questions. Friends stopped posting with her. Daniel disappeared from her company bio. And people who once called her self-made started using quieter words. Complicated. Controversial. Difficult. I never corrected them. I had already corrected the record where it mattered. In court. Under oath. With signatures. A year later, Laura called me. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Her voice was softer than I remembered. She said, "I didn't think you'd fight." I said, "I know." She was quiet. Then she said, "I thought you were too kind." I looked out my window. The city was dark. The kind of dark that feels peaceful when you no longer live inside someone else's lie. I said, "No, Laura. You thought kindness meant weakness." She didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. People think revenge is loud. They think it looks like shouting, exposing, destroying. humiliating. But sometimes revenge is just letting the truth arrive with paperwork. Sometimes justice is a judge asking one calm question. Sometimes the person who called you nothing has to sit silently while the whole room learns what you really built. She said, "I built nothing." But in the end, the only thing she built was a lie she couldn't defend.